Rex, a strong and proud German shepherd, stood quietly in his kennel. His once alert eyes, full of life, now appeared dull, as though the spark had faded from them. Abandoned by the family he had once loved and protected, he felt as if the world had turned its back on him. The other dogs barked and wagged their tails in excitement whenever someone approached, but not Rex. His tail barely moved, his ears hung low, and his posture slumped. Every day felt like a reminder of his loss, a gnawing emptiness in his chest that no food or shelter could fill. The loyalty he had once offered freely was now met with rejection. The silence of his grief echoed louder than any words could. Rex watched with weary eyes as visitors came and went, stopping to pet the dogs that seemed more eager, more excited. But no one ever stopped for him. The cold walls of the shelter felt suffocating, as if they were a permanent prison. His longing grew with each passing day, longing for the warmth of a hand, the comfort of a kind voice. He would shift slightly in his kennel, trying to attract attention, but the world moved past him. The other dogs had their moments of joy, but Rex remained in the shadows, wondering if he'd ever feel the gentle touch of a home again. His heart whispered a plea, but no one was listening. His body ached from the stillness, from the fear of never knowing love again. One day, a soft sound broke the monotony of the shelter. It was Emily, a volunteer with soft eyes and a heart full of empathy. She walked past the row of kennels, her footsteps light, her presence calming. Rex, like the others, noticed her, but unlike the others, Emily did not rush by. She paused at his kennel, kneeling down to meet his gaze. Rex flinched, his body tense, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet understanding, a kindness he hadn't seen in so long. Her hand extended toward him slowly, not out of pity, but with a quiet invitation. She saw the fear in his eyes, the sadness, and something deeper. Without a word, Emily stayed close, simply sitting on the floor beside his kennel. It was a small moment, but to Rex, it felt like a glimmer of hope. Days passed and Emily kept coming back. She didn't try to force anything, never pushed Rex to come closer or accept affection. Instead, she sat with him, talking softly, offering him space. At first, Rex watched her from a distance, still unsure whether he could trust. But each day, there was something different about her visits. A sense of calm, a subtle change in the air that made Rex curious. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to inch closer. He no longer pulled away when she spoke or reached out. Something deep within him started to awaken. Could this be real? Could there truly be someone who saw beyond his hurt, beyond his past? The walls he had built so high began to crack, and for the first time in a long while, Rex allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could trust again. Each day, Rex watched the families come and go. Some stopped by his kennel, peering inside, but no one ever stayed. They'd smile at the other dogs, the younger ones with more energy, the ones who wagged their tails and jumped excitedly. But Rex just sat. He sat in silence, watching as the others went home. He tried to catch their attention, but it was always the same. No one stopped for him. His body slumped lower each day. His tail no longer wagged when people passed by. He was starting to believe that he wasn't worth choosing. He was the one they overlooked, the one who wasn't good enough. The wounds inside him deepened, and with each passing day, his heart grew a little colder, a little harder. His loyalty, once fierce and unwavering, seemed to mean nothing. And so, Rex withdrew further into himself, his trust in humans fading like the setting sun. He feared that he would never find a home, that he would never know love again. His loyalty had no place here, but there was Emily. Every day she came to the shelter. She was different. She didn't just pass by his kennel like the others. Emily came closer, stopping to look at him, her eyes filled with kindness. At first, Rex didn't know what to make of it. His heart was heavy, his defenses high. He wasn't sure if he could trust her, not after so many had let him down. But there was something about Emily that made him wonder. She was patient, never rushing him, never pushing. She just sat nearby, offering him gentle words, as if she understood his pain. Rex would watch her from the corner of his eye, his ears flicking at the sound of her voice. Each time she came, there was a small flicker of hope inside him, like a tiny flame trying to burn through the darkness. Emily's presence became a lifeline, a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in so long: connection. But even then, Rex remained cautious, unsure if he could let his heart open again. Inside, Rex fought a battle that no one could see. The pain of rejection was deep, and every time he watched another family leave with a new dog, a wave of doubt washed over him. Was he too broken to love? Was there something wrong with him that made people walk past him? He wondered if he was just too much of a risk, too damaged from the past to ever be trusted again. His heart ached with the weight of these thoughts. Could he ever feel whole again? Could he ever be the dog he once was, loyal, strong, and proud? The fear of rejection gnawed at him like a constant ache. He wanted to believe in love again, to trust someone enough to give his heart freely, but the memory of being left behind was too fresh. It held him back. Rex wondered if it was safer to stay distant, to close himself off completely. Maybe then no one could hurt him, but deep down he knew this wasn't the answer. The pain of loneliness was even worse. It was a constant companion that echoed in his bones, reminding him of what he had lost. He feared that if he reached out, tried to connect with Emily or anyone, he would only face more pain. But how could he heal without trying? How could he find his way back to the love he so desperately longed for? The shelter was in crisis. The kennels were crowded, the air thick with the sounds of barking dogs and worried whispers. Rex could feel the tension hanging in the air. He wasn't the only one who had been overlooked, and the pressure was mounting. The shelter simply didn't have enough room for everyone. There were whispers of dogs being put down, of families being forced to choose which dogs would stay and which would be sent away. Rex's heart raced with the urgency of it all. He knew what that meant for him. If he didn't get chosen soon, he would be next. His chances were slipping away with each passing day. His once proud shoulders were slumped in defeat. There was no escaping the reality of his situation. Every time a family walked past, every time a new face appeared, his hope flared, only to fade again. Rex tried not to think about the worst-case scenario, but it was hard not to. The other dogs, too, seemed to sense the danger. There was a new edge to their barks, a rawness to the way they looked at each other. They all knew that their futures were uncertain, but Rex felt it the most. He didn't want to end up forgotten, discarded like so many others. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on him, adding to the storm of emotions swirling inside him. How much longer could he stand waiting, hoping, wishing for a life beyond these walls? Emily could feel it, the distance. The walls Rex had built around his heart were thick and high. No matter how much she tried, he remained distant, an island in a sea of uncertainty. She knew he wasn't just scared of the shelter or the noise. There was something deeper in his eyes, something that spoke of hurt that ran far beyond the past few weeks. Rex had been abandoned once, and that kind of pain stayed for a long time. Emily couldn't blame him for the walls. She understood pain more than she let on. One afternoon, as she sat just outside his kennel, she tried something different. She wasn't just there to help, to be a volunteer. She was there to show Rex that she understood, that she had known heartache too. With each visit, she spoke a little more about her own life, about how she'd lost her dog, Max, and how that pain had lingered like a shadow. She told him how much she missed Max, how her house felt empty without the sound of paws padding across the floor. Rex, still hesitant, would listen. His head would tilt slightly, his ears flicking at her voice. Emily kept going. She didn't just tell him about the loss, though. She told him about the healing that came, not all at once, but slowly, like a spring rain softening hardened earth. She spoke about how, after losing Max, she had to learn to trust again. She didn't say the words aloud, but she hoped that Rex would hear them in the space between the lines. It's okay to hurt, and it's okay to trust again. You're not alone in this. Rex's eyes softened, just a little. He didn't know if he could believe her, not yet. But for the first time in a long while, he felt the tiniest glimmer of hope. Emily wasn't rushing him. She wasn't asking for anything from him. She was simply offering her understanding, her presence. And that, Rex realized, was something he hadn't had in a long time. Someone who understood his pain. The bond between them wasn't fixed in that moment, but it was a beginning. Slowly, step by step, Rex started to let a little of his guard down. Emily's words, her quiet understanding, planted seeds of trust in his heart. He wasn't ready to leap into her arms just yet, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for him to believe in love again. Emily knew this was the moment. Rex had been so close, yet so far. She had tried everything to reach him. The soft words, the steady presence, the gentle gestures, but the walls around his heart remained impenetrable. The trust she desperately wanted him to feel, the connection she wished to build, was still just out of reach. With each visit, Emily saw the same sadness in Rex's eyes. He was so close, yet still afraid. She understood, of course. His heart had been broken too many times. But Emily knew that words alone wouldn't heal him. It had to be something more, something real. She took a deep breath and made a decision. This time, she would show him, not just tell him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn tennis ball, the one Rex had once sniffed with interest, but never dared to touch. Holding it in her hand, Emily knelt down, her heart racing with the simple act of offering. She placed the ball at his feet, sitting back a little, waiting. There was no command, no demand in her gesture, just the quiet invitation. She wasn't asking for anything but trust. For a long moment, Rex stood still. He sniffed the ball, then looked up at her, his body tense, unsure. But Emily didn't move. She stayed there, her presence calm, unwavering. It wasn't about the ball. It wasn't about the game, it was about showing Rex that he could take the first step. That he didn't have to be afraid of getting hurt again. Finally, Rex's nose touched the ball, just a brief brush, before he stepped back. Emily smiled, her heart swelling. It was small, but it was everything. The first step. She wasn't going to push him further. But she knew something had shifted. It was more than the ball. It was her heart, laying open in front of him, saying, "I'm here. You can trust me." The next day, something changed in Rex. It wasn't immediate, but there was a difference. When Emily arrived, he didn't pull back as far. Instead, he stood a little closer. His eyes were still cautious, but there was a flicker of curiosity in them. Something new, something he hadn't shown before. Rex had been through so much, his heart wrapped in layers of fear and doubt. But Emily's simple gesture had opened something inside him. The ball, her quiet patience, her willingness to let him come to her in his own time. It was enough to crack the walls he'd so carefully built. As she knelt down, her hand reaching toward him, Rex didn't shy away. He sniffed her hand, his muscles still tense. But something was different. He stayed. Just for a moment, he stayed. And that moment was everything. It was the first time he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone. Emily, sensing the shift, remained still, breathing in the calmness of the moment. Her heart echoed with unspoken words. It was a quiet understanding, a recognition of the bond they were slowly forming. Rex's instinct was to retreat, but his curiosity was winning, bit by bit. That day, when Emily stood up to leave, Rex followed her with his eyes. She wasn't the stranger he had once seen in her. No, now she was someone different, someone who could be trusted. The days passed, and with each one, Rex's wariness lessened. Emily's visits were no longer just part of a routine. They had become something Rex looked forward to. When she entered the shelter, his ears would perk up, and his tail, though hesitant at first, began to wag just a little. He wasn't fully ready to leap into her arms, but he was closer than he had ever been before. There were no grand gestures between them, no dramatic moments. Instead, it was the quiet, unspoken connection they shared. Emily would sit with him, her hand outstretched, and he would nudge his nose into her palm, just lightly, as if testing the waters of a trust he had never felt before. It wasn't about words. It was in the soft way their hearts aligned. Emily's steady presence and Rex's slowly growing acceptance. The moments of silence between them felt heavy, but in a way that was comforting. They didn't need to speak. They just knew. Rex didn't have to hide his pain behind his guard anymore. Emily wasn't going to leave him, and he could sense it. She stayed, and Rex started to understand what it meant to truly trust again. With each passing day, that trust grew, from a tiny spark to a gentle flame. It wasn't all at once, and it wouldn't be easy, but it was real. Emily was no longer just a stranger. She was someone who cared for him deeply, someone who had shown him that love could still be real. In these quiet moments, Rex didn't just see Emily as a person. He saw someone who would never abandon him. A bond had formed, one that neither could explain, but both felt deeply. And it was enough. It was a quiet morning when Rex made his choice. For so long, fear had been his shadow. Each step he took, he weighed the risk of getting hurt again. Each time Emily reached out, his instincts screamed to pull back. But today, something was different. Today, his heart felt lighter, less heavy with the weight of the past. He watched Emily from the corner of his kennel, his eyes no longer filled with the deep, guarded caution they once had. There was still hesitation, yes, but there was also something else, a flicker of understanding. Emily had been patient, her presence a steady warmth in the cold, unfamiliar world he had grown used to. She had never pushed him, She had simply waited, letting him come to her when he was ready. And now, as he stood there, with his body trembling ever so slightly, something inside him broke free. The walls that had kept him safe in his solitude began to crumble. Emily knelt down, her hands open and waiting. Rex took one step, then another. He moved closer, his heart racing with the thrill of something new, something he hadn't felt in so long. Trust. With a slow, tentative motion, Rex nudged his nose against Emily's hand. The touch was light, like a tentative dance between two souls who had spent too long apart. Emily's smile was soft, her eyes filled with unshed tears. She didn't move, but her heart swelled with a quiet triumph. She had reached him. Rex had finally chosen to open his heart, to accept the love she had been offering all along. It was a small step, but to Rex it was everything. The day Rex left the shelter was the beginning of everything. No longer just another dog among many. He was now someone's beloved companion. Emily, holding his leash, led him out of the gate, and for the first time in a long time, Rex felt something he hadn't dared to feel before: hope. His new home smelled of fresh air, soft carpets, and the unmistakable scent of safety. It was quiet, peaceful, just the kind of place he had always longed for. He walked in cautiously at first, his paws hesitant on the unfamiliar ground. But when Emily sat down on the couch and patted the space beside her, something inside Rex surged. He padded over slowly, sitting by her side, feeling the warmth of her touch as she gently stroked his fur. For a moment, Rex closed his eyes, letting the world around him settle. This was his new life, a life where fear no longer dictated his every move, where trust was given and received, and where love wasn't something to be feared but embraced. Emily's gentle voice filled the room, a quiet reassurance that he was home. Rex's tail gave a small, hesitant wag. It wasn't just the newness of the place or the comfort of Emily's presence. It was the realization that he had a place here, a home. For the first time in a long time, Rex felt something deep within him. It was the quiet, unwavering belief that this was where he belonged. The journey had been long, but the road ahead was one of hope. A new chapter had begun, and this time, Rex would not face it alone. Rex stepped out of the shelter, his paws on the soft earth, feeling the warmth of the sun for the first time in so long. Emily's presence beside him was a quiet comfort, like a steady heartbeat in the silence of the world around them. He could still hear the distant noises of the shelter fading behind him, but it felt distant now, like a chapter he was ready to leave behind. Each step he took was cautious, but there was a subtle change in the way he moved. The tense stiffness in his body, the quick glances over his shoulder, those slowly began to melt away. The world ahead was unknown, but for the first time, Rex felt a flicker of something new. Safety. The smell of fresh grass and open spaces, the soft sounds of Emily's footsteps, all told him that this was a place where he could finally let down his guard. Rex wasn't sure what the future would bring, but for the first time he felt like he had a chance. A chance to be more than a forgotten soul in a kennel. This was a fresh start. The days that followed were quiet. At first, Rex kept his distance, watching Emily from the corners of the room. He would retreat to his bed when she moved too quickly or reached out too suddenly. But Emily was patient. She didn't push. She let him take his time. Bit by bit, Rex's world began to feel smaller, safer. Each day, he found a new reason to trust her. One morning, when Emily called his name, Rex lifted his head, his ears perked. A soft wag of his tail followed, just a few beats, but enough to make her smile. It was the first time he had done that since leaving the shelter. At night, Rex would curl up beside her on the couch. His muscles, once tight with fear, relaxed. He would drift to sleep with a quiet contentment, knowing that he was no longer alone. Little by little, the emotional scars from his past began to fade. Each gentle touch, each small victory, brought him closer to the dog he once was. The dog who believed in love, in friendship, and in the promise of a new beginning. Discovering love, the meaning of loyalty and second chances, 350 to 400 words. Every day, Rex grew more accustomed to the gentle touch of Emily's hand. At first, he had flinched, unsure of the affection that had once been foreign to him. But as the days passed, he began to see that this kindness wasn't something that would cause him harm. It was a lifeline, a promise that things could be different. Emily never asked too much of him. She didn't rush or push him to move faster than he could. With quiet patience, she gave him the time he needed to feel safe again. And slowly, Rex's heart began to soften. Where there had once been uncertainty, there was now the warmth of familiarity. Where there had been fear, there was now the comforting certainty that someone cared for him. Rex learned, day by day, that love was not just something he gave. It was something he could receive too. The bond between him and Emily began to bloom like a flower after a long winter. It wasn't just about being cared for. It was about sharing moments together, about becoming part of each other's lives. With Emily, Rex learned what it meant to be loyal. It wasn't about duty or obligation. It wasn't about offering obedience just to earn a reward. It was something deeper. Loyalty became a promise of devotion, a recognition that they were not just two beings passing through the world separately, but that they were stronger together. The loyalty Rex had shown to his past owners was once filled with uncertainty, never knowing if his love would be returned. But with Emily, he learned that loyalty was a mutual gift, one that strengthened both of them. The days of doubt were behind him now. Rex no longer had to wonder if he was worthy of love. Emily had proven again and again that he was more than deserving. His heart swelled with something he had almost forgotten, hope. Through her unwavering presence, he came to understand that loyalty wasn't just a gesture. It was a promise. And in return, Rex gave Emily his heart, broken and scarred as it had been, because he knew that he could trust her to help it heal. Their bond was not just about a dog finding a home. It was about two souls, once lonely and lost, finding their way back to each other. And together, they built a love that was patient, steadfast, and unbreakable. A transformative journey, from heartbreak to joy, 250 to 300 words. Rex had changed in ways that Emily had never imagined when she first walked into the shelter. The dog who once cowered at the sound of footsteps now stood tall by her side, tail wagging, ears alert. The darkness that had clouded his eyes had faded, replaced with a bright spark of life and joy. It wasn't an easy journey. There were days when old fears crept back in, and Rex would retreat into himself, uncertain if he could face the world again. But Emily never gave up on him. She was there, every time he hesitated, every time he pulled away, showing him that love didn't fade with distance. It grew stronger. Each day with Emily became a reminder that the scars of his past didn't define him. There were moments of quiet happiness, sitting together in the park, the warmth of the sun on his fur, playing in the backyard, his paws pounding the ground with joy. Slowly, the fear that once gripped his heart began to slip away, replaced by the soft, steady rhythm of trust. Rex learned that joy wasn't just something fleeting. It was something built step by step. Each kind word, each gentle touch, each game of chase, strengthened the bond between them. Emily's unwavering love had transformed him. He had gone from a dog filled with sadness and uncertainty to one who reveled in the beauty of companionship. No longer was Rex the broken dog from the shelter. He was a full, living creature, learning that he could be loved and that he could love in return. His transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It was a rebirth. And in the quiet moments, when he rested his head on Emily's lap or watched her with eyes full of trust, Rex knew that his journey had led him to the place he was always meant to be. From heartbreak to joy, Rex had found a new beginning. And it was all thanks to Emily's unyielding love. If Rex's journey touched your heart, imagine the countless other stories waiting to unfold. Subscribe now to stay updated on more heartwarming tales of hope, healing, and second chances. Join our community and be part of the change, because every story deserves to be shared, and every animal deserves a loving home. Don't miss out. Subscribe today.